everyone, my name's Mindy. I'm currently a student studying nutrition at the Maryland University of Integrative Health. I'm glad you could join me today so that I can share some information with you about vitamin B12 deficiency in older adults. I'd like to start by pointing out a few important roles that vitamin B12 plays in maintaining health. Vitamin B12, also known as cobalamin, is required by the human body for DNA synthesis, formation of the myelin sheath that protects nerve cells, proper neurological function, red blood cell production, and the metabolism of essential fats. B12 deficiency affects between 1.5 and 15% of the general population. However, B12 deficiency is estimated to affect 5 to 20% of older adults, and 15 to 40% of older adults have low B12 levels. So it becomes evident that older adults are at increased risk for B12 deficiency. What risks are associated with B12 deficiency? B12 deficiency adversely affects sensory and neurological function and is associated with neurological disorders such as dementia, cognitive impairment, depression, and peripheral neuropathy. Although it can take years for a deficiency to develop, resulting neurological and sensory symptoms unfortunately can be reversed. In order for us to understand how older adults may be at increased risk for B12 deficiency, let's talk about how the body absorbs the vitamin from foods. Vitamin B12 is naturally bound to proteins in animal foods. In the stomach, hydrochloric acid, or stomach acid, produced by cells in the stomach lining, along with digestive enzymes, remove the vitamin B12 from protein carriers. Once a B12 has been freed or removed from the protein, it must combine with another compound called intrinsic factor, produced by cells in the stomach lining, in order to be absorbed by the small intestine. B12 that is properly absorbed is then transported via blood to body tissues. Although dietary intakes of B12 in older adults generally exceed the dietary reference intake, many older adults cannot absorb B12 efficiently from food. This is due to changes in stomach conditions that reduce our ability to produce adequate stomach acid and intrinsic factor as we age. Now let's talk about one specific stomach condition that can impair B12 absorption. Atrophic gastritis impairs B12 absorption in up to 30% of older adults. It's thought to result from prolonged inflammation due to bacterial overgrowth in the stomach, usually related to H. pylori. The prolonged inflammation damages cells in the lining of the stomach that secrete hydrochloric acid. Once the hydrochloric acid levels are decreased, the body's ability to free B12 from the food protein carrier is reduced. Older adults with atrophic gastritis still absorb some B12 from foods, but they may become deficient over time. What other conditions can impair B12 absorption in older adults? Another condition that is much less common, but perhaps more serious, is pernicious anemia. It's characterized by a decrease in the number of viable red blood cells, resulting in a reduction in the oxygen carrying capacity of blood. This condition occurs when the cells in the stomach wall that release intrinsic factor fail to release the proper levels required for absorption. The amount of B12 that can be absorbed is limited by the amount of available intrinsic factor. Any factor may contribute to lower deficient B12 levels by interfering with its absorption. Some of these include gastrointestinal disease, gastrectomy or surgical removal of part or all of the stomach, alcohol abuse, vegetarian and vegan diets, celiac disease, or other malabsorptive disorders, and some medications. I'd like to talk a bit now about what medications are associated with increased risk for B12 deficiency. Medications that suppress hydrochloric acid production, such as proton pump inhibitors or H2 blockers commonly prescribed for GERD, may cause deficiency, since adequate stomach acidity is necessary for proper B12 absorption. Antibiotics can lead to bacterial overgrowth, decreasing the B12 availability when the bacteria utilize the vitamin for its own needs. Antibiotics lead to bacterial overgrowth when they wipe out the beneficial bacteria in the digestive tract. Metformin, commonly used to treat type 2 diabetes, is also associated with increased risk for B12 deficiency. This effect can be reversed with calcium supplements, however. And acids, which neutralize stomach acid, prevent the removal of dietary B12 from protein carriers and in this way interfere with absorption. Now let's talk about what foods provide good sources of vitamin B12. B12 is found naturally in a variety of animal foods, such as seafood, organ meats, beef, pork, dairy products, and eggs. It is not found in plant foods, however, unless they have been fortified. Here is a list of some foods that provide high sources of B12. This is compiled by the National Institutes of Health. I'll move through this quickly so we get to some more specific recommendations that have a holistic view taken into account as well. The first food source I would like to start with is seafood. Seafood and fish provide an excellent source of vitamin B12. And cold water fish like salmon, mackerel, trout, sardines, and tuna are an especially good source of B12 for older adults because they have the added benefit of being great sources of omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acids. Omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acids are essential fatty acids that must be taken in from the diet or supplements. The body cannot manufacture them on its own. They have strong anti-inflammatory effects. And these anti-inflammatory effects may lower the risk of conditions such as heart disease, cancer, and arthritis. Fish, especially cold water fish that store more oil in their muscles, provide a unique source of the long-chain omega-3 fatty acids EPA and DHA. These are highly concentrated in the brain and important for proper cognitive and behavioral function, an added benefit to older adults. When talking about incorporating more seafood into the diet, it's important to note the difference between farmed or wild-caught fish. Due to the generally higher total fat content, farmed fish can be appropriate sources of EPA and DHA. Although, because the vegetable oils used in aquaculture feed are very rich in omega-6 or inflammatory fatty acids, farm fish are associated with a lower anti-inflammatory or omega-3 to inflammatory or omega-6 ratio. There are also concerns over contamination of farm fish. According to the Environmental Working Group, 7 of 10 samples of farm salmon purchased at U.S. grocery stores were contaminated with PCBs at potentially unsafe levels, and on average have 16 times the dioxin of those found in wild salmon. Now I'd like to talk about some other animal products that are excellent sources of vitamin B12. And it's important to remember that animal products should be sourced from organically raised, pastured, or grass-fed animals whenever possible. Organ meats are a great source of B12, and liver and other organ meats provide a concentrated source of vitamin A, B2, iron, zinc, folate, and other essential nutrients. Beef is also an excellent source of vitamin B12. It's important to distinguish between grass-fed and grain-fed beef, however. They have the same types of fats, but they have different amounts of the different types of fats. For example, there's more cholesterol-neutral saturated fatty acid and less cholesterol-elevating saturated fatty acid in grass-fed versus grain-fed beef. Grass-fed beef is higher in the precursors for vitamin A and E and cancer-fighting antioxidants, and also has a better omega-3 to 6 ratio. Dairy products provide excellent sources of vitamin B12, as well as providing an important compound known as conjugated linoleic acid, or CLA. Studies have shown that CLA protects against obesity, cancer, formation of plaques in arteries, and diabetes. CLA levels in the meat and milk from grass-fed animals is higher than from grain-fed animals. Another consideration when thinking about dairy products is low versus full fat. High intake dairy fat has been associated with lower risk for central obesity, and low intakes of dairy fat have been associated with higher central obesity risk. Also, according to recent research, there is no significant evidence associating dietary saturated fat with increased risk of coronary artery disease, even though saturated fat, particularly from animal products, has gotten a bad rap. Due to these reasons, and as long as the dairy products are from organically raised pastured animals, I would recommend full over low fat. How can vegetarians and vegans prevent B12 deficiency? Strict vegetarians and vegans are at high risk for deficiency if they're not consuming fortified foods or a supplement. They can prevent deficiency by eating bread, cereals, or other grains that have been fortified, or taking a daily supplement such as a standard multivitamin. Fortified breakfast cereals provide a highly available source of B12 for vegetarians and vegans, as well as all older adults with malabsorption. Synthetic B12, because it's not bound to proteins, is absorbed better than a B12 from foods. It does not require hydrochloric acid to be freed from its protein-bound carrier. And for this reason, the National Institutes of Health recommend older adults get the majority of their B12 from fortified foods containing synthetic B12 or dietary supplements. The Institute of Medicine recommends adults over 50 get extra B12 by supplementing the diet with a standard multivitamin, which provides 6 milligrams B12. Older adults with decreased absorption due to atrophic gastritis or low stomach acid can prevent deficiency by taking a low-dose crystalline B12 supplement, since crystalline B12 is passively absorbed by the small intestine. Some additional factors that may be related to B12 deficiency. Lactic acid bacteria, or LAB, is a beneficial bacteria that produce lactic acid as the end product of the fermentation process. They're found in fermented foods like yogurt, kefir, tempeh, miso, kimchi, sauerkraut, and pickles. Lactic acid bacteria from fermented foods and beverages or probiotic supplements may help establish healthier gut bacterial populations, resulting in increased production of cobalamin within the digestive tract, because lactic acid bacteria have been shown in studies to be able to produce cobalamin. It also protects against bacterial overgrowth, because friendlier probiotic bacteria take up space and prevent pathogenic bacteria from taking over. The last thing I'd like to talk to you about today is how folate intake affects B12 status in older adults. High folic acid intake can mask a B12 deficiency by correcting pernicious or megaloblastic anemia, which is typically a trademark of vitamin B12 deficiency. Folic acid does not, however, offer protection from the progressive damage to the nervous system caused by B12 deficiency, and for this reason, healthy older adults should not consume more than 1,000 micrograms of folic acid per day. I enjoyed my talk. I'd like to show you now my full references where I got all this amazing information to share with you. I hope it's clear how important it is for older adults to be aware of the fact that they are at an increased risk for deficiency, especially if they are taking certain medications. And I hope that they could incorporate some healthy, whole food sources of B12 into their diet, but because they're suffering